Great. Thank you, Christos, for the introduction. How many of you teach? Great. How many of you use AI for teaching? In any way? It's a bit vague as a question, and there is an intention for that. Great. I see many hands. And I have good news and not so good news for you. The good news is that AI will not replace education. The not so good news is that the way students learn might change. So what I'm going to show today is the real deal. And this is a work done from Science Center of Excellence, University of Cyprus, and Cognitive UX. So let's think about how we consume information today, right? Especially the Generation Z. We have TikTok, we have Reels, we have Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And these, in a sense, are kind of quick, visual, engaging bursts of interaction, right? But more importantly, this phone here, this new generation prefers this way of learning. And now compare that to education. What do we often do as educators? We rely on kind of 45 minutes, 1 hour lectures. But what if we think of alternative ways of engaging this kind of generation? And that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. What if learning could feel like scrolling reels while staying accurate in facts, useful, and being trustworthy? So our work builds on two different strands of literature. On one side, we have the short form videos, which are engaging and easy to consume, but they've mostly been explored for entertainment, right? So you go on Instagram, TikTok, and you just consume entertainment content. And on the other side, we have the generative AI area that is quite super powerful for content creation, but we don't really fully trust it yet. And our contribution lies exactly in the intersection of these two areas. So what I'll show you is a system that we developed that generates short reels from long lecture videos, while we're trying to preserve the instructor's original material. And second, we tested this tool that we developed to see how effective these AI-generated reels are compared to traditional long-form lectures. But here I want to stress that our goal is not to replace the traditional lecture. Our goal is to augment it and try to provide alternative and complementary ways of how students consume content. So here's the Reels ED. And the core part of the system, we have a sort of automated generation pipeline where the instructor can upload a lecture video, and then the system will extract from the transcript the key moments using a prompt that we developed. And we rely on GPT-4 to identify these key moments in the video. And then the system will generate a sort of summary, trims the video, and assemble it in a sort of concise 60 to 90 seconds form. And the result, in a sense, is a kind of structured microlearning clip, which is based on the instructor's own material. And in our experiments, we used 4 lecture videos, which are typically produced 30 to 60 seconds reels. And we used programming subjects like Python, C, and Java, and machine learning as well. And we relied on these kind of introductory courses because from literature, programming is kind of widely used in microlearning studies to enable meaningful comparisons of cognitive workload and engagement across different backgrounds. To design the system, we relied on 3 principles. First, we went back to the cognitive load theory, and one of the ideas was to break the long lectures into smaller chunks so learners can process information more efficiently. The second is the idea of microlearning, and here, by making a shorter, bite-sized, in a sense, content, it will make it easier to access, retain, and revisit for future references. And the final aspect was about trust, since we rely on AI-generated content, we want to keep the process transparent, but also keep the instructor's material, in a sense, in its original form without having the model to hallucinate. So, does this thing work? So we ran a user study with 62 students in the University of Cyprus. We had a bit of distribution across male and female. And what we did, these students came from different backgrounds, mainly computer science, data science, engineering, mathematics, and social sciences. And we randomly assigned them into two groups. The one that had the long form videos and the other that were about the short form videos. And both groups saw exactly the same programming and machine learning content, but the difference was that the format. So we wanted to understand whether this format that we developed was effective. And the whole study lasted about 20 to 25 minutes. The students in their group watched their assigned video and completed a quiz and then filled different questionnaires that I will show in a minute. So we relied on these 4 dimensions. So we had 4 measures. One was about the user experience through the EQ questionnaire to understand how enjoyable, clear, and usable each format was perceived. The second was the learning effectiveness when we had the quiz. So we measured quantitatively the completion time, how many times students revisited each video. We also had the perceived efficacy of the system by measuring the confidence, focus, and satisfaction through different questions. And finally, the ones who used AI-generated content, we also asked them, we adapted a widely known questionnaire on trust in AI to understand what were their beliefs about whether the system was reliable, accurate, and fair in a sense. So here's some of the results. Just to give you the gist, 14% the students who used the Reels system scored 14% higher on quizzes compared to those watching the longer videos. And they also finished the quiz about 2 minutes faster. But if we look at the plot in the very end, in your right, more importantly, it was not just about watching the content. The number of visits it was another factor that played an important role. So in a sense, learners were just watching more content, but they were actually learning in a sense better. Here's some of additional results on the different measures. Beyond the scores that I just mentioned, learners in the Reels condition reported that they felt more competent, but also more skilled and more satisfied. They also said that the short clips made it easier to focus, easier to retain key points, and easier to explain the topics to others. But here I'd like to be upfront that although we didn't find statistically significant differences for cognitive load reduction, the numbers were lower in the group of the LLM. So it was a kind of marginally significant difference. And especially for the trust, which is critical, as we all know, when we produce AI-generated content, the good news is that the learners rated the system as trustworthy, reliable, and accurate. But of course, we observed some concerns about harmful intent or expressed some moderate skepticism that we might need to keep working on transparency and explainability in AI-generated content. In addition to quantitative, we also asked students follow-up questions where we analyzed thematically. And here are some quotes from our participants. One mentioned that each reel did only a specific task and I could understand it better before watching the next one. Another student mentioned that these short videos made the information are more memorable and easier to understand. So in a sense, you can think now how one can use this kind of tool. Imagine that you have an introductory 101 to machine learning. You can squeeze the main elements, and before going to the lecture, you can give students a short clip to watch before delivering the 1-hour lecture. Now, implications for HCI. I want to leave you with 3 things. Number 1, it's about agency. AI should empower students and should empower more broadly the way we educate students, but not replace the educators. And in this system, the Reels ED, students valued being able to jump between short clips, and in a sense gave them a sense of control, which I believe is an important aspect when designing with AI-generated content. The second is about transparency in the process. So the idea here is that trust doesn't come just from having a system that is accurate or performs well. Students wanted to know how the AI chose or summarized the content, and this came up also during the feedback that we received after they interacted with the system. So here is a broader aspect of designing for explainability, which is a kind of current issue in the HCI literature, not only technical, but we also need to involve all these different stakeholders and try to make our systems explainable. And finally, the third point is the idea of microlearning and cognitive load that could potentially, through this idea, could potentially ease the cognitive load of that students might experience. And in a sense, the short form videos that were AI generated created a sort of short and modular content that helped students to focus and navigate the lecture material in a more easy way. And again, although we didn't find strong statistical differences in the cognitive load, we observed lower numbers in the group that used the AI-generated content, which might suggest some potential benefit, but of course, future studies should further explore that. So the lesson here is that we should not design AI just for accuracy and speed, but we should also design it for agency, transparency, and trust. And to conclude the talk, these AI-generated reels are not just shorter forms of learning. They can actually be used in a more engaging, more fun, and more effective way that we can engage students in our lectures. But it's important to stress that these tools are meant to complement instead of replace the teachers. And there is a broader discussion going on whether AI is going to take our jobs or how our jobs are going to look like. I had some discussions earlier. And in a sense, this tool can work before, as I mentioned, before a lecture to introduce key ideas, or after a lecture to help learners to revisit and reinforce the material that they have been taught. So the goal here is to augment the teaching process, but not to automate or replace it. And with that, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the great presentation. I really love the project. I think it's a really fascinating idea to cater to our students' needs by rethinking how we can also reshape our learning materials. And I was really impressed to see that the learning performance was so good for the short videos. And maybe because you know the long format videos and the short videos better than us, could you speculate a bit about whether still things might get lost and what these things could be? So if I know these tools are meant to augment other forms of learning, but sometimes our students don't use things we prepare for them in the way we intend to. So if students would only rely on these short form videos, what do you think would get lost maybe?
I totally agree with your question. So just let me step back a bit, just mentioning the caveats of this study. So we tested it only on mostly STEM, in a sense, students, computer science, mathematics, and like engineering. And this could have had an effect on the way why they scored better. So I think one speculation could be it's different if you have 1 hour philosophy lecture where you have more points or compared to if you show the key moments, for example, how Dijkstra algorithm works or a certain topic in databases, and then the students will pick, because these will be the main beats, right? Whereas I suppose future studies could, in a way, explore differences between subjects, and then maybe we get closer to the point where what are the things that can be missed.
So there was also a question from Spiros.
Yeah.
Okay, it's going to be a very short one because I know there's plenty of people also wanting to ask questions. So, Marius, thank you very much. This is excellent work, and I'd love to test it one day in class. I mean, I'm really curious about that. But I have just one question. I think maybe I missed that. In the beginning, you said that the students were from quite different backgrounds. I think you mentioned also social science or something like that.
There were a few in the social sciences.
Okay, so my short question is this: whether you noticed any differences between the various backgrounds, because some are probably closer to the actual teaching material, and some others may not be so related to that. So whether you notice any differences in the results this way?
No, we didn't do any subgroup analysis, but I guess with also the numbers in a between subject study where you have 31 in each group, I think it would be extremely difficult to break it down. The numbers won't work, but I would expect that there would be differences. But I cannot say like in a conclusive way, that's why we haven't done it. The statistical power wouldn't be there. But 100%, I assume there would be. And linking back to the other question, I would expect other subjects like philosophy or more literature kind of things to see differences between, because it's also in the way they perhaps there be also cognitive or neurodiverse, different types of learning might be engaged as well there. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Marius, congratulations. Very, very interesting. It brings up quite a few things which relate to wider concerns we have as teachers. Now, as you know, the attention span is getting smaller and smaller, and it's hard to get and even in this conference, I mean, very often you see people looking at their mobile phones because the attention span is getting shorter. And so even the format of this one, 15 minutes, is perhaps too long. And should we adapt, or should we accommodate so that we maintain the formats we used to have in the old days? Now, I have some questions and some concerns. One question is to understand clearly, you put an emphasis on LLM, which I think is just a tool for creating the new form, and the form factor was the main thing here, that instead of having longer presentations, you highlight it and process into smaller reels the content. If I understood correctly, the content remained the same, but perhaps it was more emphasis put in some points, and then the segmentation of the overall material. So the overall length of the segmented of the Reels version, was it exactly the same length as the original content, the original material? That's just to understand better what you've done. And then my question, if I want to complete, and then you do. Now, how do we measure learning effect? As we all know, I don't know if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy or other methods of designing the depth of learning, how we can use, apply knowledge, or just stay at the level of just facts, factual knowledge. I remember this fact, this data. Now, there are various levels of learning. And I'm just curious to know, I mean, how did you measure this? Because it's one thing to remember, I don't know, the syntax of a command in C or Java, and another thing to be able to apply all this and use it in a project or in such situation, which means a deeper understanding of the notions. So do we have any evidence on this last aspect of learning is improving through this process? Because I just have a problem. I'm old-fashioned, but these short videos are just to impress, not to go deeper into meaning making.
Great questions. And I'll start with answering the second question. We could do an experiment. We can all use this tool in our classes for a year, and then we could measure the longer term effect. So what we're trying here, I very much agree with your point that this could be, it was just as part of an experiment where we cannot say in a conclusive way that it improved the deeper learning, or we just used some ways or some ways that are typical in evaluating the students to actually see whether they understand the concepts that have been presented. But I believe we need longer term studies that we can actually test whether this short form video actually did improve the way students not only remember things, but actually grasp the meaning or basically what the content is trying to convey. That's for the second question. And for the first one, whether the emphasis is on the LLM or the form factor, again, I agree that the difference here in the conditions is we have a long form and the short form, and the AI played the role of the mediating device, let's say, in creating that short form. One could have easily sit down, identify the things, and then we put it together in Photoshop or in any other video editing tool. But it's important because now we live in a different era, and the way our work is being done might need to change in the future. So we need to be able to adapt. So, and then that's why what we're doing here, we tested this capability because we had to do a lot of prompting, how this prompting would look like. We also disclose in the paper the prompts, and everything is on GitHub. So for those who want to replicate this work. And actually, does it hallucinate how close is to the original content of the material? Let's say I'm doing data science, and all of a sudden I'm just hallucinated and created irrelevant facts. How can I sort of ensure that is correct? So yeah, it's a first step, I would say, in this process. But one final remark, I would say, I think AI is here, is going to stay, and we might need to rethink how we do, even in education or in any other context, how it's applied. Any other questions?
No, we don't have time for other. Okay, thank you very much.